And with that, we are winding down the holiday season. It is the 28th of December. We've got officially, 4 more days. I guess we run this out to January 1st. And then it's all over. It's done. We're finished with. Oh, I froze. I froze. I froze. Sorry about that. But, when things freeze, you have to unfreeze them. And that's usually by rebooting the computer. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Got a little True Hemp Science cap on to go with my new hoodie from my pal Masaki. Shout out to Masaki. And well, how is everybody? I was just talking about how the holidays are about to come and go. It was an odd holiday this year because I was moving and I felt like I just spent the majority of it packing, driving, strategizing, and paying people. That's what it was mostly about, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of life, right? And Mercury retrograde's been interesting. Definitely, Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks. Some of you might know him from Shark Tank. Just recently purchased. Well, no, he didn't purchase. He sold a majority share of his team, the Dallas Mavericks, to Sheldon Adelson's widow, with the idea that they're going to create a new stadium for the Dallas Mavericks to play in, and it will also be a casino resort. Of course, the Adelsons, they specialize in taking money from other people. So, but under the more luxurious guise of leisure and pleasure, right? So Mark Cuban sold most of his shares in the Mavericks and still believes that he'll be able to retain his interest in the basketball side of things, meaning that he'll be able to run the team. I don't think it's going to go well. I don't think signing major contracts during Mercury retrograde is a good thing. Now, there is a school of thought that says that if you are in agreement prior to Mercury retrograde, it will work out for you theoretically. When we bought this house, everything was started and we signed the initial paperwork, the offer, and everything prior to Mercury retrograde. But I can assure you that once we moved in, excuse me, we went through 2 retrograde periods. One was when we signed the final deed. Everything else, all the offer, everything was agreed upon prior to that. So we went through 2 retrograde periods, and the other was when we moved recently. So what's been interesting is having to go through and redo a lot of the stuff that just wasn't finished in this house. Like the studio that I was in was a fucking piece of shit. When we moved in, it was completely unfinished. There was a light dangling from the ceiling, so all this had to be painted and redone. And so, I mean, there is a sequence to the order of the universe and the chaos that is attendant with it at times. And I don't think retrograde periods are to be feared. Like, don't go in a cave just because it's a Mercury retrograde. In fact, don't go in a cave when it appears to be a challenging astrological time. Although I will say that April of next year is definitely going to be a challenging astrological time. So there's a friend of ours who heads up the Austin Astrological Society, AAS, not ASS, but AAS. And her name is Shannon. I think she's part of the Astrology Hub. And they're having a big event on the eclipse in Dripping Springs in April. And I decided not to have an event on the eclipse because I think this eclipse is going to be quite intense. Not that the last one wasn't. It was, but it was an intensity that was good. And, you know, it really sent just an absolute cosmic jolt of energy through the group here in the Hill Country. But this is different. Anyway, it's going to be this 3-day event in April, and I'm going to be speaking at one of the days. I don't know which day. It's a 3-day thing, so I'm going to be there, and that was all kind of agreed upon during a Mercury retrograde, which is why I'm bringing it up. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, and you want to attend this 3-day event in the Hill Country, I'll have more information as the event draws closer. You know, kind of a different style, cabins, camping, right? And yeah, it'll be interesting if you're into that kind of, you know, how do I say this, sort of shared new age affirmation archetypal experience. If you're into that, it's your thing. And I'll be speaking there at least for one portion of the event. We had a really interesting Mercury retrograde experience on Christmas Day, and it was such a funny experience. So Joan is in addition to all of her other talents, she's a fantastic baker, and she made these gluten-free pumpkin pies, and I was like really into this idea of having a gluten-free pumpkin pie. And she was in San Antonio, and she was driving out here, and she forgot the pumpkin pies. And I have to say, I was slightly crestfallen over the lack of gluten-free pumpkin pie. So we started to drive around, and there's absolutely nothing open. Of course, nothing would be open. But Joan had this great idea. Why don't we try the Inn of the Hills? Maybe they have some kind of event going on, and they might have a pie. Well, sure enough, the Inn of the Hills is where we have the event here, and sure enough, we drove there. The place was packed, and we rolled in. And a lot of you are familiar with if you've been to the event, you're familiar with Marvin. Marvin is this really cool guy who's the head chef, and they had a big spread there. And the guy who helps us with our event, who's another guy, super nice guy, he saw us, recognized us, and we told him about our pumpkin pie dilemma. And of course, they actually had an extra pumpkin pie, and they sold it to us. And to me, that is very Aquarian in a Curvillian sense, right? It was very Aquarian, like knowing somebody, hey, you got a pie? Yeah, we got a pie. Here, let us sell you our pie. And that's what happened. So there you go. A little pie action on Christmas Day. The other thing too is yesterday, I don't like to talk about my personal life too much, but when it comes to astrology and the transits are there, they're worth mentioning. Yesterday was all about my mother. It was a full moon in Cancer, right? And it was just all about my mother, and I could tell she was having a hard time energetically. So I had to jump in and do some stuff for her, right? Like help her get her room together. And then we got a blood test. We did all this stuff. Like yesterday was Mom's Day. That's what it was all about. Mom's Day. And I'm wondering if you guys, with your own experience with the Cancer full moon, either had something like that, or you were dealing with domestic issues, home life, because it really felt like that was the day yesterday. And we still have the Cancer full moon. Why don't we get into it? We'll do a little bit of presentation here. By the way, please hit the like button. If you enjoy this content, hit the like button, and let's see if we can pop this thing and get it into the algorithmic mix. The algorithmic mix, which makes our algorithms ticks or something like that. Anyway, here we go. There is that Cancer moon right there. Still big, still full, still effulgent. It's an effulgent moon. And it's in third decan, which puts it in the Piscean decan. Do yourself a favor. Before it goes into Leo, slow down, pour yourself a cup of tea or a nice warm beverage, and just reflect momentarily on the good fortune that you have. And everybody's got issues. Everybody's got challenges. Some are way more challenging than others in the relative world. But just reflect. And this is an interesting time that we're in, because we're about to head into 2024. And you just mentioned 2024 to anybody who's in the astrology game or the sort of the synchromistic game. In 2024, whistles and bells. I mean, it is going to be a very intense year. There's no doubt about it. So it might be a good thing to just sit back for a few moments before this calendar year clicks in and kind of take it all in. Because we may be having a very different kind of discussion next year at this time. And honestly, I hope we're having a discussion. I hope that that the systems stay online, and that we can continue this work for as long as we can. There's no guarantee, though. And especially with Mercury retrograde, now that it's moved behind Mars, right now it's in the background. And usually when you have Mercury in the background, of course, there's background material, back chatter. Things aren't always kind of on the surface. And in Sagittarius, there's a lot of scrambling. There's a lot of scrambling to make things appear more right than they were initially. We've talked a little bit about this. Because Ceres is now in second decan Sagittarius, putting it into the Aries decan. So that's an interesting component. Like, how do you nurture the aspect of will, especially when it's in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius represents the higher will, right? And theoretically, there is no distinction between the higher will and the lower will. It's all one will. The will of the one or the will of the all, the true will. But you would want to theoretically nurture that. So what would you do? You'd want to get in touch with that. And Sagittarius is a sign when it's on in a good way, can be very inspiring. So this would be a time where you, if you wanted to, as we move into second decan Sag, that the material that you want to take in, nurture, is also theoretically empowering, right? Empowering stories of faith, understanding, people that are able to overcome significant odds based on their fortitude or their belief in a higher power, the Most High, to achieve things, to go beyond the standard limitations. That may be a story to follow here over the course of the next few days, and just kind of see how this pops up in the collective theater. All right, so there's Mercury right there. And just for a brief period of time in the morning, we have this inconjunct with the moon, and we also have a Mars inconjunct with the moon. And that's going to be brief, right? And the moon is locked into this really nice grand trine, which is passive and just want to go with the flow and have that cup of tea or the latte or whatever you like to drink, right? I mean, it's a nice kind of moment of repose, but there's a restlessness that's underneath everything. And that's the inconjunct. And this is in the morning hours here in the Northern Hemisphere of the United States of America, as it is for now. But in other parts of the world, say if you are in Europe and your day is winding down, there is still a sense of restlessness, like you've got more to do. I have more to get done, but you just want to just say, you know what, I'm done for the day. Let me have a glass of wine or whatever, right? Because that's where the energy's at. What do you want to do? You want to come up here? You're being very restless today. This is Peachy. She's exploring the studio. Every single inch. This is what this cat does. She does not leave an inch unturned in this place. She's putting her mark on just about everything. Jasper, on the other hand, is more like live and let live. But there's a sense of restlessness. So it's an interesting kind of energy, right? And I'm not sure how you incorporate just kicking back and relaxing and taking things in with this underlying sense of restlessness. I mean, sometimes that's just how things are. And it's one of those things where you settle down and go, okay, here you go. You sit back and you're, yes, the world is beautiful and it's about to end, but it's okay because everything's perfect. And then all of a sudden, a crisis kicks in or somebody calls and then you got to deal with it, right? That's kind of the inconjunct. It's kind of like all hands on deck. Doesn't last very long. By the time we get into the early part of the evening, the moon is separated and it's headed towards its next destination, which will be Leo. and we'll check in with the moon in Leo starting tomorrow, getting us ready for the weekend. It's upon us already. But it's a nice grand trine, and it definitely favors domestic occupation. Occupy your space to the best of your ability. Yeah, these nice, try to find some, respite and repose. Those are also two words that kind of fit into the Mercury retrograde prefix category. Try to find some respite and repose and take advantage of it. Recharge a little bit. That's not to say that you won't be interrupted because of that inconjunct. We still have the squares going on with Mercury and Mars and coming right in and squaring off against Neptune. And a lot of that is agreements and just people kind of not living up to their agreements, not showing up on time, not being there. Right, that's a big part of the Mercury Mars square with Neptune. Some unreliability. It's in the air. Your vehicles may also be a bit less reliable today, so keep that in mind. If you have a backup vehicle, maybe you might want to. You just may want to make sure that everything is cool with your cars, right? Check your water level, check your oil, all the things that are basic and fundamental with a car. Check your power steering fluid, check your brake fluid. In fact, today might be a good day to take your car, if you have time, maybe this will help you with your restlessness, to take your car and have it, the oil changed and the filters changed and lubed up. The only thing that you want to make sure, and by the way, this has happened, is that sometimes the grease monkeys do not tighten the nut on your oil pan tight enough. And then people will leave the express oil change place, and about 15 miles down the road, all the oil seeps out, their engine seizes up, and they're screwed, right? If you're going to do that, just make sure, just go over, did you make sure that the oil pan is tight? Is that nut cranked? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I cranked that nut. So it might not be a bad day to do that. At the very least, have them checked. This is one of those days, I'm just sensing here. It's one of those days. You don't want to be interrupted from your appointed journeys, especially if you're headed home. In terms of communication, of course, with a Mercury retrograde and Neptune square, again, I just feel like that's people not living up to their agreements. But you said I was going to get a pony. You promised me a pony. How many times you ever heard? I was promised a swing set. I never got the swing set. What's ironic is this house that I'm in now has a swing set in the backyard. So I got the swing set. I just had to wait till I was 63. Sometimes that's just how life is. It's, but son, I'm going to promise you a swing set. You're not going to get it until you're 63 years old. But don't worry, it'll be fine. And when you get it, you'll understand why you had to wait so long. We do have a Moon-Pluto opposition. That's an interesting opposition. And again, we're dealing with this very domestic energy. And I think on a positive note, I would say that you're sitting around and you're having your tea or you're having your coffee or you're having your wine or you're having your port or you're having your whatever. And you realize, I got to change some shit up around here. Well, this needs to go, and this needs to go. And I got to, that's the Pluto Moon opposition. You just realize, man, look at this. If I don't take care of this, I'm going to have long-term consequences with that, right? And that's the Pluto Moon opposition. You realize that there are deep structural changes. Again, this is only for a brief period of time, but the moon is full. So it's illuminating these issues, right? It's like, man, I got to take care of this business. And then, of course, with the Pluto-Jupiter square, you realize, well, that's going to take some money. This is a really good time for maintenance energy. If you have the wherewithal, you have a little extra cash, good time for maintenance energy. Why? Question mark. Well, because the skeptic in me, the paranoid skeptic in me, says that in the future, maintenance energy and maintenance resources may be harder to come by. Just saying, right? You want to tighten things up. You want to make sure you have your ducks in a row, because who knows? Come March, April, May, June. This eclipse is going to be a big deal. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to change the country. It's going to change the world. I'm on record, right? So you want to get as much done before it happens. Speaking of some Mars energy, there was a picture circulating around the internet of one of our new fellow citizens carrying a rifle into the country. Now, it didn't look like a very powerful rifle, but nonetheless, apparently not the only one. So, I think it's great that they're bringing their own guns here, so that they don't have to jump in line, with American gun owners and get a gun that maybe an American gun owner wanted. So at least they're bringing their own guns. And I'm not saying this to pass my paranoia on, but I'm just giving you some details as to kind of where this is all going, right? So this is this Pluto opposition, what I'm talking about. And again, it could be just pure structural matter, looking at, well, I got to get this done. I got to, if you have the time and the resources and you need to replace a hot water heater, you may want to do it, right? If, the Jupiter-Pluto square means you're probably going to get into the cash a little bit, maybe get into the savings, or maybe you'll put part of it on a card. But trust me, 6 months from now, you will thank me for doing some of these things, because it's just going to get harder. It's going to get more difficult. Venus is finally moving away from Uranus, so those tricky disruptions in relationships and contracts, well, they're abating, they're ending, and we still have the Venus-Saturn square. And it's actually getting a bit closer too, right? Because Venus is about to move into Sagittarius. I think that'll be by next week. What is it? 28 degrees. No, that'll be by the weekend. So I think on Sunday, we have a Venus ingress into Sagittarius, and it'll definitely be squaring Saturn. That's legal stuff. That's going to be very interesting, because there's so many kind of levers going on, legal levers, with states like Colorado and Florida, and not allowing these candidates, whether it's Trump or Biden, to be on the ballot. You're going to see that. You're going to see a lot more of that with this Venus square to Saturn, and ultimately when Venus squares up against Neptune. And I just think a lot of these frivolous lawsuits are going to get tossed. It won't be without the requisite hype and sort of the froth that comes along with it. But just wait, you'll see that most of these things don't. One or two will slip through. I'm not even talking about Trump. But there's going to be a few odd cases that will slip through. But as soon as Venus moves into Sagittarius, then it's going to recalibrate a lot of these legal decisions. And with the square with Neptune, there's no ground. There's no solid ground beneath it. And every now and then, it won't matter. It'll be like, what the fuck? By the way, I'm not a big Tim Pool guy, but apparently I'm subscribed to him on YouTube. And I watched most of his interview with Marianne Williamson. First of all, Marianne Williamson, hats off to her for going on Tim Pool's show. Tim, just like all these other kind of libertarian, slightly right, conservative inserts, they try to get liberals or progressives on their show, and they won't show up. Although Marianne Williamson did, to her credit, and it was fascinating to watch those guys take her through whatever you think of Tim Pool or Ian or the crew. The one thing that they can be good at is, in their world, establishing a logical premise. And they did this one thing where they were talking about legalities, right? The legality of abortion, or the legality, when does a human become a human, stuff like that. And eventually he did this on purpose too. He led her into George Floyd, and he led her into how Derek Chauvin was not able to get a trial, a reasonable trial, because the waters had been contaminated, right, through social media. There was no place, like they couldn't relocate the Derek Chauvin trial to, I don't know. I'm not familiar with a lot of places in Minnesota outside of the, St. Paul, St. Cloud, Minneapolis. Is there Bloomington, Minnesota? Anyway, they couldn't relocate the trial. And so he led her down this path, and it was amazing how unaware Marianne Williamson was of a number of different things. But it's not surprising, but amazing. Like, she did not back in the summer of Floyd, when they burned that church next to the White House, when Trump had the Bible upside down, that whole weird thing, and they were throwing Molotov cocktails at the White House. She was not even aware of that. I don't know why I'm talking about her, but I think a lot of that has to do, again, with this Mercury Neptune square. I mean, she was exposed for not having a tacit understanding as to what's going on with the larger political sphere. But I will give her credit for being on the show. Kudos to you, Marianne Williamson, the crystal-toting grandma candidate for. Could you imagine fucking Marianne Williamson as president of the United States? Who knows? Maybe she just get right in there with everybody else. All the other strong, independent female leaders of the world, and hanging out with Klaus Schwab. She might just fit right in. Although she'd never be elected. She still has somewhat of a conscience. She's not as informed. And it's amazing when you see that. And I don't think it's willful ignorance on her part either. All right, let's get into our star of the day. We got a good one today. I got a good one for you today. And today is an interesting day. Today is a very interesting day. Let me get my banner up here. Let me banner up. Let me banner up. Here we go. So today, there's some fascinating people born today. Like, I could take 5 people from today and just do a whole week on each various star, right? A lot of brain power born today. John von Neumann, who is considered to be one of the, founders of cybernetics, quantum theory, big brain, post World War II intelligence asset, serious, right? Linus Torvald, the guy who invented Linux, today's his birthday. It's also the birthday of Kary Mullis, who we're going to talk about today. It's also Ma Anand Sheila's birthday. I almost did Ma Anand Sheila. The brain trust, the power behind the power in Rajneeshpuram. She's still alive. And very interesting chart. Moon in Aries conjunct True Node in Aries. Boy, did she have a fucking Moon in Aries, man. She ran that place like a mother general. It's also Denzel Washington's birthday. Bill Lee, the spaceman. Great chart. He was a lefty, and there's a famous picture of him pitching in a NASA spacesuit, right, with the oxygen tank on back. He's got a glove, and he's on the mound. And he's wearing this thing. And Bill Lee has the True Node in Gemini conjunct Uranus, right? When you see that, it's like, that is totally Bill Lee. He's out there. But Kary Mullis is a really, really interesting character. He's the father of the polymerase chain reaction, or the PMCR, polymerase chain reaction, or PCR. The PCR test that they used to figure out whether or not people had COVID. And how many times did people play Kary's video where he says it's not meant to be used to diagnose diseases or diagnose disorder? He said it had some potential to do that, but that's not what it was about. So Kary Mullis, on this day, December 18th, 1983, with his girlfriend in Mendocino, California, he cracked the code. He cracked the polymerase chain reaction code, or PCR, and he wound up sharing the Nobel Prize with another scientist as a result of that work. Very important work. And Kary was a very interesting dude. Very interesting. Aries rising. He didn't take any shit from anybody. And there are a number of videos of him basically ripping Tony Fauci a new asshole. And not just Fauci, but the realm of corporate science. Now, he worked for a company called Cetus, CETUS, which is the whale. And there is a constellation. It's off the ecliptic, the constellation Cetus. And I was able to find, like, Tau Ceti is in Cetus. I couldn't find Tau Ceti as a fixed star, but I did find Mira, which is one of the brighter stars in Cetus. And it's right there at 0 Taurus. So, what do you get with Kary Mullis in the birth chart? Well, first of all, he's somebody that does have some traditional values. He's got that True Node in Cancer. So he's going to be kind of anti-corporate, right? But we can see that he's got the South Node. He had a difficult time in corporate. I mean, he brought a gun to work. He got into a fight one time with his lover at work. He was a very tempestuous character. And yet the corporate setting was what provided him with the tools and the research money for him to do his work. Of course, he's a Capricorn, and he's got big ideas, right? He's a ninth house sun. And he wasn't just, like, his book is really good, At Play in the Fields of the Mind, which is if you haven't got it, get his book. because he talks about a lot of interesting things there. And one of the things he talks about is astrology. He's very into astrology. And he's got Venus in Aquarius. So he has a relationship with astrology. And there it is in the 11th house. And he's got this Venus-Neptune trine. So he's got a bit of a mystical bent. And then he also has a Venus sextile to Mercury and Mars. He's got that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. But again, it's in the 9th house. So he's a big idea person, a big concept person, a big cosmology person. And the day that he cracked the code, I wanted to see, where were the planets? So we had the Sun and Jupiter and Neptune were all in this stellium in his 9th house. I mean, on this day, we've got the sort of the twin turbine of the Sun and Jupiter, 9th house, inspirational, right? That is the download. That is the cosmic download coming down through the 9th house, which is the higher mind. There it was, right? And you would say, well, the Sun and Jupiter, no, it's the conjunction. It's the twin towers, right? That are coming in and infusing. And he's going through that Neptune transit of his 9th house. So inspired, higher mind stuff, right? Here's Mercury, transiting Mercury right on his midheaven. So it's going to have an impact on his career. And not just his career, but ultimately, unfortunately, and this is really weird, right? Because there's that South Node. And, I'm sure Kary was just turning in his grave because they weaponized the PCR. They fucking weaponized the PCR test, right? That was the thing that was going to, and what they did with that, right? They dialed it up. So if there was any kind of debris or matter, fungal, microbial, whatever, that PCR test was going to pick it up. And if it was going to pick it up, that meant that, guess what? There's a very good chance that you had COVID, even though that's not what the test was for. And they set the parameters as wide as possible to pick up as much anomalous data floating around in your body, right? And that's that South Node. And what's interesting is that I think his son is like very close to Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci is a 2-degree Capricorn. So he had dueling Capricorns with Mullis. And Kary Mullis died 2019 before this shitstorm hit the fan. He's got Uranus down here in the 2nd house. So he's got to be a free agent. I mean, putting him in a corporate environment, not good. Not good. He would have to have some degree of autonomy in order to be functional, right? That's just the nature of Uranus in the 2nd house. And so he also has, kind of this fair amount of oppositional energy going on. Moon in Gemini, so he's curious, he's restless, and he's got that moon in the 3rd house, which allows. To me, I think he understands through that moon in Gemini and this opposition with all these planets in the 9th house, which are very truth related, right? I mean, it's not just the 9th house being this harbinger or this space for truth, but it's the planets there that are in the sign of Sagittarius, which represent that. He's cutting things down like climate change. Like, he's not a big climate change guy. He's cutting things down like HIV and AIDS. Like, he's going in and he's essentially, on this oppositional wavelength, right? Gemini is curiosity, got to prove it. And then he kicks that material up to the 9th house and the higher mind. This guy's mind was restless. You get a Mercury-Mars conjunction, in Sagittarius, and that Mercury's retrograde, this is a restless mind, right? And so he's always trying to solve problems. He's always trying to break things down into their component parts and then shoot them up to the ninth house to get the bigger picture. And then he has Saturn down here in the third house, which gives him some discipline, I think. It gives him a sense of being able to kind of focus and be scientific, even though his Saturn, what sign is it in? Let me zoom in a little bit. Where is that? Saturn. Yeah, it's at the end of Gemini. So, to me, the signs that are the most scientific are Gemini, Aquarius, and Virgo. And he's got all these planets in the sixth house, right? So that's where his Virgo work comes into play. He's got Jupiter in Virgo, Pallas in Virgo. So it's about pattern recognition. And Virgo is all about the body and bodily systems. So he's heavily invested in the sixth house. And he's got Neptune there. So his approach to the sixth house is going to be different, right? But look at this day. He's got Mars conjuncting Neptune. He's got Neptune in a wide conjunction with Mars. Sun, Jupiter conjunct Mars, Mercury. Hello, boom, there's the download. True node in Aries, conjunct the ascendant, the birth of something new, right? So this is a very significant day, that the PCR, the code is cracked. Of course, there's refinement, and they've got to test it and, do all the stuff that goes along with it. But if you want to look at a day where there's a scientific breakthrough, this would be a great day to spend some time with the synastry and to understand the energies of a breakthrough. There it is. It's right there. Right there. Even with Juno, right? Juno right on his ascendant in Aries, pioneering something new, giving birth to something new. Anyway, Kary was a fascinating guy, taken from us far too early. He mysteriously died in 2019. And that was all on the heels of COVID, right? Well, not on the heels of it, just prior to COVID. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Kind of makes you wonder how the father of the PCR, the one guy that could go toe-to-toe with Tony Fauci on this subject a year earlier, passes away from a heart ailment. Maybe that's just how the universe rolls. Or maybe there was something perhaps a bit darker. But we lost a great scientist and a great mind and a maverick, a true maverick. Speaking of mavericks, my buddy Chris is coming up with some new CBD, some new stuff. I think at least 3 new nanoparticulate CBDs that are going to light your world on fire. So if you're interested, you should just, semi-regularly go back to the truehempscience.com site and see what's up there. All you got to do is spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get free goodies with your $100 order. 150 or more get you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee with the goodies at True Hemp Science. So Kary Mullis, there you go, your True Hemp Science star of the day, brought to you by True Hemp Science. All right, a little bit long today on the old Astro Weather, but we'll be back tomorrow right here with a little Astro Weather for the weekend and leading into the Friday forecast. And I'll be joined by with Mario from Symbolic Studies. And some of you may have seen Mario on a stream that I did with Dr. Longo, and who else was on there? Ben. Really good stream. And Mario's great. He is an art and graphic design major, or that's what he does for a living. He's very into the tarot. And we're going to be looking at Capricorn and the goat and Saturnalia and Saturn imagery tomorrow on the on the Friday forecast. So don't miss it. Be a part of it. Be great to talk to somebody, and he has a ton of insight and a really good website. So please join us here tomorrow at 12 noon. And then I'll probably do an Astro Weather at 11, half-hour break, 11 to 11:30. And then we'll jump in and we'll do the Friday forecast. And then tomorrow afternoon, I think at 3, I'm over on Beth Martin's channel. I don't know if you know Beth's work, but she's great. Does a lot of stuff with archetypes and other things as well. So looking forward to that. Anyway, we're cranking it back up as we come into the new year. So there you go. I wish everybody an absolutely blessed day. And we'll see you guys back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Bye for now. Oh, don't forget to hit the like button. And mods, thank you for all your help.